I'm gonna be honest. I never figured I would come across a quest that I would give a 10 out of 10. However, this most recent quest, man, it is the closest. I want a 10 out of 10 this. Give me a 9.5. And here's why. So here, the video is finally here. We're gonna talk about my thoughts on this. Is also kind of weird. Minus -0.1 for this, but Dark Falls Solus. Pretty sure this is supposed to be a Starless enemy. Why is he still called Dark Falls anything? I said it's a Dark Falls level enemy, but I'm at this point just being, nitpicky. In the background, you guys are likely going to see footage. Either it's already playing or will be playing shortly of my first clear of Solus. And holy crap, is that fight fun! Like I mentioned, I didn't think it would be, at least it would happen anytime soon, that there would be a fight that I would give so close to a 10 out of 10 when it comes to just overall fight design, just pretty much everything, honestly. Now, when it comes to Solus, it is easily my favorite fight in the game so far. And mixed with Lucille Exploration recently releasing the new treasure scratch that's popped up, as well as stuff that's going on with Urgent Quest, PSO2 is moving in a really, really good direction, like a very positive direction that I do like to see. Hopefully it can continue that trend, because I don't know, man, this has just been like, this is the most fun the most I've wanted to play PSO2 in recent months. I can say that much. Like the most I've wanted to just log in consistently, and anything else going on is just, to me, has been annoying and getting in the way of me playing more PSO2. So Solus, what are my thoughts, how I feel about the boss and everything that has to do with it? Honestly, like I mentioned, the boss fight's fun. I think it's pretty well balanced as far as health, its damage goes. I expect it to just be one shot all over the place, and I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not super I'm not 100% a top tier gamer. I'm not the 1%. I do pretty well for myself. I can consider myself maybe top 10, top 5%, but like I'm not the top 1%. Some of these guys are absolutely insane, and though I try to gear like them, it does mean that there are quests like this that sometimes I'm concerned about getting absolutely floored in. And to my surprise, that wasn't this quest. Even with my gear having minus 15% damage resistance, I still was only 2-shot, which tells me anyone who is gearing properly while also gearing with some of the newer gear, you're probably not dealing with that minus damage resistance, meaning probably sitting comfortably at 0% damage resistance with tons of HP and PP, since you can get a ton from the most recent augments. And if you're someone who likes to err on the side of caution and get a bit of damage resistance, if you have it, let's say in your fixes on your armor, or any of the Gua not affixes, yeah, any of the Gua affixes, excuse me, that you would use, then you honestly are probably going to sit a much more comfortable situation than I was. Well, I was mostly 2-shot by almost everything. I'm sure most people will, if they're playing a bit more defensively, will probably be closer to 3 or maybe even 4, depending upon their class combination. As far as his attacks, one thing I did notice is nothing really felt unfair. Actually, if anything, everything felt very, like, I don't want to say scripted, but very mechanical. Like, it felt a lot like as we learned the fight, we started to understand what you could go after, what you should probably ignore, how things move around the battlefield, what to expect of certain attacks, what attacks are going to be a priority to make sure you're dodging or not getting caught. Now, there were still some situations where I was kind of irritated, mostly of my own skill level. But there's some cases where if you get an unlucky string of attacks together while trying to push out more damage, you can get comboed. For example, our overall strategy when we went in was with a Tector and with a Ranger, and we ignored the bombs, put a blight round on the boss's hand, and left the bombs up to step counter the not the bomb explosions, but like the bomb attacks that he would do, the little square attacks. We would step counter those while step countering the hand, and because the timing of those could sometimes line up, if they would sync up and you missed one, you would just get hit by both. And for me, like I mentioned, I'm 2-shot, so I would just die. Now, granted, that's not something you have to deal with. You can just blow the bomb up, or you can destroy the bomb. Not have to deal with that situation, but we were trying to push more damage, so we left them up, and it definitely did pay off in the end as far as our clear went. Now, when it comes down to the phases of the fight, that was actually probably one of the coolest things for me. I didn't realize this fight was going to have a major secondary phase, which I guess, spoiler alerts for those of you guys who haven't cleared the fight yet or haven't seen it, there are multiple phases. I guess you could count 3, realistically 2 major phases where you fight him in one form and then fight him in another one. Looking back at the actual art for the fight, I'm not sure why I never noticed, but you can see him very clearly in his first phase. And then the cutscene that he's going into second looks like one of the photos that's on there. So it's very easy to tell that he had another phase, but at the time I never even thought about it. Realistically speaking, I probably should have, but I digress. He definitely was very surprising, I guess, moving into that phase. The damage check wouldn't seem too bad. You do have to be on your toes, and that's one thing I will mention, because I did see a few of these things pop up on Twitter, and I'm going to preface this with, like, don't take offense to this, because I know some people are probably going to feel kind of bad, but this fight isn't scaled in a way that it's unfair. In previous fights in PSO2, you could pretty much get away with just pressing buttons. Like, you could pretty much freestyle any class and get through most content, as long as you had the gear, even the dual quests, to be honest. You may not be able to push an S rank, but you would at least get through the quest itself, so you'd be able to get the rewards you were looking for. Essentially, with the right augments, you didn't have to worry about like proper rotations or pushing, you know, the strongest button at the right time, given the tools you had in front of you. This quest is not one of those quests. Unless you just have a few people that are really pushing damage, realistically, if it's your first clear, everyone's got to be kind of on top of their A game. And you can't just really be spamming buttons. You need to actually understand the buttons you're pressing, why you're pressing it, because if you're realistically consistently hitting a button that could be something else, that could be a lot more damage just because you're not really used to like the proper rotations, your damage is going to fall behind, which you can now see since we have a DPS meter. And unfortunately, you guys are going to run out of time at the end of the quest. Now, there are ways, of course, to circumvent that with certain class combinations, of course. You can take, of course, stronger players. And over time, we're going to get more and more powerful, meaning this quest is going to get easier and easier. That's kind of the normal thing for MMOs. Now, some people I've noticed maybe aren't used to that sort of concept, but over time, quests are going to get easier. And realistically speaking, you're going to get more geared. The first clear being, you know, a minute left, 2 minutes left, 30 seconds left. That's pretty normal in the MMO space at the very least. I'm someone who comes from progression rating back in Final Fantasy 14. And if we were killing things at the point of certain gear scores where, you know, one missed global cooldown or one missed button could make the difference in some cases for certain fights. In other fights, you know, depending upon, you know, our RNG with boss phases or RNG with damage, we could be, you know, right up against an enrage mechanic, basically running out of time in the entire encounter and have like maybe 1 or 2 seconds left on the fight before actually clearing it. So for me, it makes perfect sense that, you know, a lot of people would be pushing really, really hard on their first week of clears because not everyone has their Verschmelz weapon. Not everyone is geared up. And funny enough, a good friend of mine, Uber, mentioned this too, and I thought about this, and I was going to say something about it, but of course he mentioned it in a tweet, so I was like, cool, I'll retweet what he's saying because it's exactly what I was thinking. This quest was meant to come out around this time frame. Keep in mind, Lucille Exploration was originally slated back at the beginning of version 2. Had that been the case, players would have had access to Lucille Exploration and probably would have farmed it up to get a lot more gear, when in reality we had a week's difference between Lucille Exploration and this. So a lot of players probably weren't ready to jump into this piece of content. So it does kind of feel a bit bad, at least for them, when you're looking at having enough time to put stuff together to be able to clear the content. But realistically speaking, if you were geared up from the previous, I guess from before version 2, then you were perfectly fine with the gear that you actually had access to. For those curious on gear, my first clear was with my Gunblaze. I was using a Gunblaze weapon, and then all of my augments from the previous tier. I think was it Gladiosol, Alphanali, and basically it was the BIS setup minus High Eldamina. Basically everything else was BIS minus High Eldamina. So take that for what you will. I think my potency was 153% or 156, something in that realm. Realistically, it was what I was working with. And then my Gunblaze was a little bit cheaper augmented. I know I swapped out a few things. I had like a Gigas Might 4 in there instead of a Gigas Maste, and a few things like that mixed in. So Weapon or gear wise, I was fairly decently geared, but I wasn't like geared to the absolute teeth, the most amount of damage, full octo gear, full best in slot augments, you know, all that good stuff. That we were nowhere near that point, but we still managed to squeak through a clear. And to be fair, I did actually get some assistance for some friends. Shout out to my good buddy Cord, as well as Nep, who play with us on ship 2. Super instrumental on getting us that clear. And it's gonna bother me, and you guys will see the name in their name in the bottom left hand corner. Yo, editing chrono here. I wanted to give a proper shout out. So I'm probably gonna say this wrong, and I apologize in advance. If Google is to be believed, it's Gostoika. I probably pronounced it as Gosutoika, but either way, shout out to that person. You're dope. Thanks for rolling up of our run. But we did source a individual from chat who also had not cleared to play Ranger for us. So shout out to them as well. Thanks for coming along and being a good sport. I know they had some rough times in the mix there and felt kind of bad, but hey, look, that's all a part of progression. And I was getting bopped pretty hard too. So it's all good. As far as the reward system goes for that quest, there's a little bit I wanted to talk on that as well, because I don't know how I can put this without sounding a little bit mean about it. Players really just kind of want everything. And if it's not everything, people really feel like everything is being drip fed to them. I love the reward structure for the new quest, and hear me out before you get your pitchforks out. So the first time clear, you're going to get 2, what is it? They're like 2 vital something. I can't remember what they're called, like vital design things. Basically, there's stuff that goes over your HP bar. There's 2 new ones, which I said flat out when those came out originally. I was like, please, please, please make it so these are more rewards for like more difficult stuff, because I think these are way cooler than just having titles. And the next big quest, we got 2 of them. So, well, I'm not the biggest fan of them, realistically speaking, since it's Ranon and Aina. And while I don't dislike either one of those characters, I don't think the little thing over your HP bar looks that cool with those characters there. That is exactly the type of reward I wanted to see. On top of that, your first clear for the week will also net you some SG. This is my one complaint with this fight. It's 20 SG. That's way too low. Realistically speaking, I would much rather see that be closer to about 100 SG. I would love it to be 200 SG, but I feel like that's probably not going to happen. Or maybe at the very least be like the first few clears you have for the week give you 20 SG. It's just I get it. The fight's 15 minutes. It's 15 minutes of your time a week, so 20 SG doesn't seem that bad, realistically speaking. And if we compare that to SG that we used to get, let's say something like CM, if you were someone who was in a group where you guys were doing challenge mode 3, I believe, so CM3, and you were running it and actually getting the full rewards for it every week, it'd take you roughly about 30 minutes sometimes. I'd say between 20 and 30 minutes if we were fast, 30 and 40 minutes if we were just taking a lax run. And you would get 100 SG if you did everything perfectly right. Now that's if you did everything perfectly right. There were no deaths, you got max score, because if you got max score, basically you would tie for first place with everyone else that got max score. So you would guarantee getting yourself 100 SG per run that you did. Now, of course, people ran multiple runs. You would do like a run on each character, and then you do a run on the universal ship. So you can get yourself, if you did everything, you get yourself 500 SG per week, basically. And we did that for a little while. It was pretty nice. Now, I would have liked to see this at least be 100 SG, because at the end of the day, it is a difficult fight to do. And 20 SG just feels kind of bad. That is my one complaint with this fight. Outside of that, you have a chance at Tissa weapons, which, I mean, RNG is RNG at the end of the day. Like, you really can't count on RNG for it to be a fair barometer for everyone across the board. These are kind of like the lottery weapons. They're worth like 200, 300 mil, and realistically speaking, making them drop more often just means they're going to be worth less for those people that do get them. Now, I know there's some people that disagree with that take, but I personally believe that every Phantasy Star game needs to have like that god tier drop that's just worth a ton, that's super awesome. Not something that's worth chasing, but if you happen to get it, it would be super amazing for you. It's one of those situations where there needs to be an alternative, and currently there is. It's when there's not an alternative, that weapon feels pretty bad. We have the Vershmel's weapons. Those are definitely the weapon you should be pushing for and trying to get yourself set up with. If you happen to see a Tissa weapon, if you're someone who just has money like that, if you happen to, or you happen to get that lucky, then hey, by all means, either use it or sell it. It's up to you as an individual. I think those types of weapons are definitely important, because when they don't exist, farming just feels a little bit boring, I'll be honest. What they do guaranteed though is that quest does give you a Starl Soul. This is being very, very undervalued in my opinion, because that is one of the key augments that you need to craft a very, very potent augment. So that's one of the key augments you need, I believe, is Class Gladiusol. Correct if I'm mistaken in the comments, but it's a guaranteed drop every single run, at least the ones I have seen. I have not seen a run yet that has not dropped a Gladiusol if you clear the run. So with it being a guaranteed drop, people are thinking, oh, it's one Gladiusol. How really useful is that going to be? Keep in mind that before this, the only guaranteed Gladiusol that you would, not Gladiusol, I'm sorry, the only guaranteed Starl Soul you would get would be from an urgent quest, and that's not a guarantee that urgent quest would always pop, right? So you've got hours between it, or you have something you can farm and it realistically get a Starl Soul every 15 minutes. And that is a consistent farm that you'll get to build towards a very, very expensive augment. That means it's more money that you can make. So keep in mind, granted, yes, not everyone is going to be able to do this and make that money, but I mean, Starl Souls is going to be brought down in price a little bit. That means you can either buy them off the market and combine them into making what you're looking for, or the possibility of a more expensive augment is going to be brought down in price just a tad because more people are going to be able to make it. So that's something that's now not tied to an urgent quest, that is tied specifically to something that is consistently farmable. And that's why I believe the rewards are the way that they are, because it is consistently farmable. This is something that I know some people kind of looked at similar to Hatred Profound Darkness back in base PSO2. And while I was able to clear it and I loved reaping the rewards from it, it was a very divisive moment for the community, because a lot of people like to have this mindset where this is the graduation quest, right? Like, you have to be able to do this if you want to get the good stuff. Well, it put a premium on skill, because realistically speaking, it wasn't just enough to have good gear. You had to play very, very well. And then on top of that, it also gave you insanely good drops, like extraordinarily expensive stuff. So it just took the gap between the players that were able to clear stuff and the players that, you know, were just casual farmers, and it made it much, much wider. And while I personally profited from this and I enjoyed it a whole lot, you have to remember a majority of the player base are casual players. A vast majority of the player base are casual players. That's the case in most MMOs. You need to make sure that when you're tailoring the experience, well, yes, there's some things that can be designed for players of a higher skill level. It needs to be designed in a way that it doesn't vastly separate the player base. So I think the reward structure is actually pretty solid. Could it be a little bit better and more in favor of the player clearing? I do believe so, yes, but I think just having a guaranteed Starl Soul mixed in there, having a chance at a better weapon mixed in there, as well as a couple of other things, is pretty solid as well. And then there's also, you know, the chance at getting a hold of the Almaties. I can't think of the camos and things like that mixed in as well, that are worth a good amount that you can sell to. So again, at the end of the day, I think it's definitely one of those quests that feels worth it. And since it's something you can absolutely farm consistently, it's not something you have to wait for an urgent quest to pop. It definitely feels pretty fair to me. Again, if you're having issues with the damage, maybe check what you're doing, maybe double check what other people are working on. There's lots of speedruns out there. I'm not telling you guys just, hey, look, get good, but just winging it is not going to be the play. If you're just throwing out attacks, it's not going to get you where you need to go. So you need to understand a few things about the quest itself. And that's really about it, guys. That's my full thoughts on the quest. It is a bit long. Apologies. I'm not sure how much footage I'm gonna have to throw in the background. I'll try to grab a hold of some failure runs in the mix maybe and see where I got bopped, and maybe you guys will enjoy those. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I think the future of PSO2 is pretty bright with these quests existing, and I'd love to see more of them. I do want to see more rewards like this. I love these cosmetic style rewards. It kind of just, you know, it's a subtle flex that I'm cool with. It kind of reminds me of, you know, things like Final Fantasy 14, where realistically clearing some of the hardest content in the game got you an equal weapon that you would get to something so much similar, which is raiding with a single extra augment slot. Realistically, you did that super difficult content in the game for a cosmetic reward and nothing else. That was the only reason. So I guess my style of reward system, this just reminds me of it, and I'm thriving. By the way, guys, thanks for watching all the way to the end. Like if you guys enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to keep up with more, and I'll see you all next time. Take care, everyone. Peace out.